Welcome to 10-Minute Tip Time, where today we're chatting with Helen Hirsh Spence about the benefits of multi-generational workforces and how they're a competitive advantage. Our show is sponsored by Platinum Pivot, a consortium of experienced business professionals that shares practical tips to help other professionals navigate challenges. I'm your host, Helen Latimer, a career transition coach and founder of 925 Resources. Our guest is Helen Hirsh Spence, the founder of Top 60 Over 60. She founded Top 60 Over 60 to provide thought leadership, consulting, and training on age diversity and inclusion. Nice to have you with us, Helen.
Thanks, Helen. The Helen Show.
Yes, very nice to get two Helens in the same room. Doesn't happen very often.
No, it
But
doesn't.
this is a great topic and I want to learn more. So tell me, why is it that multi-generational workforces should be of interest to employers?
Well, it's a good question. I think it needs to be explored more and more. I mean, the world has changed so much since our parents and grandparents worked. We now have more than five generations in the workforce at the same time. And because we have so many more aging individuals, they are going to have to find ways in which they can subsidize their later life so that they can have not only a longer life, but a more productive and better life. So that's the bottom line. But what happens is that ageism gets in the way. And by ageism, I'm just talking about, prejudice and stereotypes based on age. It's really the only ism that is socially acceptable in the world today, unfortunately. And therefore, with more older people working or wanting to work, but being cut out because of a lot of ageist myths, they don't have access to the workforce in the way in which they may have even just a few years ago. But all of that is changing, I think, and will have to change for a variety of reasons, which I'll get into later. But the bottom line is when you've got a multi-generational workforce, you have more innovation, you have greater productivity, you have the better or more experienced individuals who tend to have better socio-emotional skills than younger people, and you have increased loyalty, and that happens with older people. But conversely, you've got all the benefits as well that younger people bring to the workforce, and those are very significant as well. They're not just digitally inclined; they have other wonderful assets that we also need to learn how to work with better. Together they make for a great complementary skill set.
Absolutely. And are the differences between the generations, are they that great?
Well, the truth is they probably have more in common than differences, but society tends to play always on differences. It seems to sell more papers or more hashtags and so on. So, I mean, the bottom line is that all generations really want to be respected. They want to contribute meaningfully, and they want to be valued. So they have that in common, but they do have, very different experiences, life experiences, and different core values. And when you combine them, you've got a dynamite combination. But for instance, older employees tend to be more formal. They put more weight on competence and reliance on what worked in the past. They care deeply about company reputation and brand, and they've lived in much more hierarchical organizations all of their lives. So that's one thing that differentiates, boomers and traditionalists with millennials and younger generations, Gen X as well. But Gen X and millennials, they have a natural openness to new ideas and approaches. They want to influence decisions. They want to leverage technology in ways to be more efficient. They also want constant dialogue with colleagues and supervisors so that they can get guidance, both positive and negative. And their approach tends to be a lot more collaborative. But what businesses really need is both ends of the spectrum. It's not sufficient to have one or the other. And the other thing is that you want your customers and clients to be mirrored in your workforce. For example, in retail stores, if I go in and if I'm met by a 25-year-old who really doesn't think that I have much value, they may not be able to serve me quite as well. And I know that that's the case for friends of mine who go looking for bathing suits, and so it's problematic in that regard.
Yeah, and it seems like such an important issue, and yet the benefits are really profound and valuable. So why do you think that people aren't talking about it more? It doesn't seem like we hear a lot about the value of the multi-generational workforce.
Well, there are a couple of reasons. I think one, and I won't go into it in great detail, is because there's a huge demographic shift that nobody's really acknowledging. We have a world that's aging. But more significantly, right now, you and I are in a period of lockdown, more or less. Businesses are reopening. It's because of COVID-19. It's affected us all in a variety of different ways, and it's going to weigh into the future as well. So it's been an inflection point. It's brought out some of the ugliness about older people and ageism in particular. It's really aggravated and resurfaced an awareness about it, and it's pulling generations apart. I mean, it's not helping people when you see hashtags like boomer remover or grandma killer or how to confuse a millennial. In fact, it's segregating us that much more into age silos. So the truth of the matter is, when we talk about it now, it's a lot more about talent management moving into the future, because we have today so many people who are over the age of 65. The reality is these people are going to have to work longer. But we have 20 and 30-year-olds in the workforce today, and they're going to be working into their 70s and 80s. That's going to be the norm because our lives are extending. And they're extending across the generations, not just at the end, contrary to what you might think. So the current workforce, it needs to have a blend, and we need to learn how to blend it, and we need to start now. Because when people start coming back to work, when we're in recovery mode, they're going to need to get back on their feet as quickly as possible. Just like with COVID-19, we looked at retired professionals to come back to help out. Businesses are going to need older adults who have experience and that have other attributes to help them get restarted. So that's one of the major reasons I think we need to be talking about it now.
Absolutely. Together we're stronger. So what are you seeing organizations do to address some of these generational preferences and manage the shifts?
Yeah, good question. I mean, they need to recognize it. They can't just think of everybody as being the same. If you've lived through a world war, your experience and the way in which you react is going to be very different than somebody who hasn't. And I think that's what we're finding now with COVID-19. Many of us who are older have lived through difficult times before, not a world war for most of us, fortunately, but other serious calamities. So the way in which organizations are dealing with this is through awareness and education. They're creating cross-generational dialogue forums. They're using a variety of channels for comprehensive communication plans. So not relying just on the telephone or just on email, but they may be using Slack or Basecamp or a variety of different means of communicating. They're seriously considering, the issue of knowledge transfer, and trying to think of ways that they can structure processes so that institutional knowledge is transmitted to the next generation. And it can be as easy as just engaging younger employees in reciprocal mentoring options or possibilities. And then they're also looking at, cultural things. How can they be more inclusive? Using technology to gain efficiencies and to work differently, and just to introduce, engagement surveys based on generations, or create leadership opportunities so some of the younger employees can participate in leadership roundtables and, provide feedback upward as opposed to only one direction. So that's one thing, but probably most significant has to do with recruiting and retention strategies, quite frankly. I think the biggest pain point for most businesses is retention. And I think in the past we've had to just look at one message for all generations, and now that's not going to work. So businesses need to leverage internship programs, and they have to be a lot more transparent about compensation and, engage people at different points in their career path about what they want to do moving forward into the future.
Very interesting strategies, and it sounds like retention and recruitment are the top priority. Can you tell us a bit more about why that is?
Yeah, briefly. I mean, I mentioned before the demographic shift. By 2026, 4 in 10 working age Canadians could be age 55 or over. And by 2025, 75% of the North American workforce is going to be millennials, but most of them will have less than 5 to 10 years experience. So we're going to need to tap into those who have the institutional knowledge in organizations to help equip the future generations to take over. Millennial retention is a big pain point. 21% changed jobs in the last year, and 60% say that they're open for different jobs at any time. And that's according to a Pew Research and the Gallup poll and PwC information. So in terms of turnover, older people tend to stay the longest, the boomers and Gen X.
No, that makes sense, and you can certainly see the cost to business for not working on retention. So as we get to wrap up, can you give our listeners some last-minute tips that so that they can try and create greater age diversity within their workplace?
Sure. Well, first of all, take a look at your recruiting ads and images on your web pages. Do you have anybody who reflects the people that you want to attract, first and foremost? Look at your work arrangements. How flexible are they? When you're younger, you need time off because of your children. When you're older, you need time off for your parents in many cases, So flexible hours, job sharing, long-term, short-term assignments. Take a look at the benefit packages that you're offering. Are they diverse enough to interest, both ends of the spectrum? Do you have ways in which you can retain your aging employees so that they can transfer information? Mentoring programs, promotional opportunities or for older adults, reskilling and upskilling opportunities. Or just asking, would you like another job here, but you want to stay, because most people probably do. But the bottom line, really, Helen, is that, we need to combine the talents and the strengths of all the generations to benefit from the skills that we need moving into the future, because there's nothing that's going to stay the same. And we're going to need to adapt and change. So we need everybody working together.
Absolutely. And that's a lovely message that we all need each other and that we're better as a collective. It's been wonderful listening to you chat with us this afternoon. And for our listeners, thank you so much for joining us. And if you enjoyed this afternoon's presentation, you may want to follow up with Helen. And Helen, how is the best way for someone to connect with you if they'd like more information?
So you can reach me at Helen at top60over60.com. Write out all the words. So you need to know how to spell 60 twice. Helen at top60over60.com. Give me a call. Be glad to consult with you.
Fantastic. And if you enjoyed our video today, please go down below and ring the bell and make sure you subscribe to our Platinum Pivot Top 10-minute tips. So we have new content coming out all the time. Thank you so much for joining us, Helen. It's been a pleasure. Thank you all for coming.
My pleasure.